So, on the 1001 Movies Challenge, there are 4 Marvel Cinematic Universe movies that made the cut. However, it doesn't really make sense to watch these 4 movies in isolation, as a lot of context from the other several dozen movies in the franchise is often needed to understand these movies. Endgame didn't happen in a vacuum after all. But also, it doesn't make sense to give every Marvel movie its own video in this challenge, so instead, I've decided to cover the entire MCU in one video via a tier list. This is going to be pretty informal and unscripted, so let's just quit rambling and get into it.
I am Dracula.
I'm gonna make him an offer again.
You're gonna need a bigger potion.
Dance off, bro! Me and you!
Alright, Iron Man. This one started off the MCU, and it started off pretty well. And this is a good thing too, because if this failed, I truly think that the MCU would have never taken off. We've seen this with other cinematic universes over the years, where when the first movie is a flop, the rest of the franchise just never takes off. For example, the Universal Monsters Cinematic Universe was supposed to start with Dracula Untold, until it sucked. Then it was supposed to start with The Mummy, until it sucked. And now we have no Universal Monsters universe. Anyway, Robert Downey Jr. is great as Iron Man, as he will tell us many times.
I am Iron Man. I am Iron Man.
I am Iron Man.
I am Iron Man.
The Incredible Hulk, failure. Absolute failure. It's almost painful to watch this now, as absolutely nothing from this movie is relevant in the future. So it just feels like a huge waste of time. Also, as good of an actor as Edward Norton is, he was just totally miscast as Bruce Banner. Iron Man 2, while a lot of people I think would label this movie as crap, I think that most of the hate is just because Iron Man 2 is not as good as its predecessor. I thought it was an enjoyable movie anyway, even if it's just basic. So we'll put it in basic tier. Thor. This isn't everyone's cup of tea, but I actually think that this is one of Marvel's most emotionally in-depth movies. I feel like the first Thor movie doesn't crack as many of those cheesy jokes at inappropriate moments like many of the other MCU movies are known for doing, so I'm actually gonna give it an A tier. Captain America, the First Avenger. To be honest, this deserves basic tier, but I do love stories set during the World Wars, so I'm gonna bump it up. Fight me. The Avengers. The first big crossover event. Cinematic universes are so commonplace nowadays that it is easy to forget just how groundbreaking this movie and the series up to this point truly was. Marvel was doing something that nobody else had ever done before, and it paved the way for future cinematic universes. So while Marvel movies are little more than popcorn flicks when all's said and done, they were still pretty revolutionary in regards to making cinematic universes a mainstream concept, and the first Avengers movie is a perfect representation of that. Iron Man 3, so while I appreciate that this movie tried to show some character depth with Tony Stark's PTSD arc, I really didn't care for this entry, and there's several reasons why. The Mandarin. Thor the Dark World. I'll just let Genie Collects explain this one.
It was foolish of me to think that this man could be a good student. I had a feeling he didn't even see the movie Thor the Dark World. So I released him from the spell of enthrallment I had placed on him and allowed him to return home. The peculiar man still follows me today. I sometimes see him in his car, looking at me. He still wants to be my student. I can sense his thoughts. but unfortunately, he will never be as good as Thor the Dark World.
So yeah, obviously the greatest movie of all time. Captain America the Winter Soldier. This was probably the first MCU film just to make me go, wow. I don't follow the comics, so the twist in this movie really caught me off guard, and it was quite the enjoyable thrill ride. After the previous two movies, it was nice to see Marvel get its mojo back. Guardians of the Galaxy. I have this movie to thank for getting me into Marvel movies in the first place. I had seen the Avengers movie before, but didn't think much of it before I saw the other films, and then it all made sense. And Guardians convinced me to see the other films. So you could say I was hooked on a feeling. Bum bum, hooked on a feeling. Avengers Age of Ultron, so not as good as the first Avengers movie, but I still liked it. Ant-Man. Really wish that Edgar Wright had actually directed this movie. I think we can all agree that it would have been much better that way. But what we got isn't so bad either. Captain America Civil War. So, Avengers 2.5 basically. Sure. This movie really changed the landscape a lot for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. A house divided cannot stand, and we'll see that come to fruition in the next official Avengers movie. But as for this one, like most people, I do believe that this is one of Marvel's better entries. Doctor Strange. This movie combines three things that I really like: wizards, Benedict Cumberbatch, and car crashes. A tier. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Yeah, too many penis jokes for my taste here, but as always with the Star Guy group, they have great taste in music. I'm gonna put them in basic. Spider-Man Homecoming. Two things. Tom Holland is my favorite live-action Spider-Man, and Peter and Ned's nerdy high school relationship gives me a lot of nostalgia for what my high school best friend relationship was like. And if you must know, I was the guy in the chair. A tier. Thor Ragnarok. So after audiences didn't respond too well with the darker tone of the first two Thor movies, Marvel responded by making him more fun. And while I think that Thor's change in tone is definitely benefited Thor's character overall, part of me also mourns the loss of the stoic god we used to know and love. But I will place this in A tier anyway. Alright, Black Panther. So while I do think that this movie was overhyped because of the racial politics surrounding it, I also think that the other side underhypes it for much the same reason. I'm going to make a bold move and take the middle ground here. Gasp. Yes, while it wasn't the first black-led superhero movie as the media at the time would have you believe, people pointed out the Blade trilogy. I would offer the counterpoint that the Blade movies, although very successful in their own right, never reached the same level of mainstream spotlight that the Black Panther movie did. So yes, Black Panther was important and groundbreaking for representation in superhero movies. Black Panther, I think, was a very well-made movie with great action sequences, and Chadwick Boseman, may he rest in peace, was awesome as King T'Challa. Unfortunately, not to get too into politics here, but I do think that there are some problematic elements present in this movie. Mainly in its attempt to be racially conscious, I guess. The movie kind of ends up depicting all black people, whether they are from America, Africa, Europe, or otherwise, as being basically a monolithic group who all have the same interests akin to the American Black Lives Matter movement, which is quite the oversimplification to say the least, if it's true though. Well, maybe I'm just an idiot and I'm reading this movie wrong and everything is actually fine. I don't know. Depending on which extremist you ask, I'm either a dumb wokester for liking this movie at all, or a racist for not liking this movie enough. I think I'm neither, but I've already rambled too long on this one, so it is what it is. We'll move on. Basically, I like this movie moderately, so we're gonna put it in basic. Avengers Infinity War. If the first Avengers movie was a Komodo dragon-sized accomplishment for tying everything together, then Infinity War was a freaking kaiju. Weird comparison, I know, but the point is, Infinity War is the culmination of a decade and a dozen and a half movies worth of build-up, and this was one of the best experiences I've ever had going to a movie theater. Seeing it all come together in a grand finale was just so satisfying. Well, at least it's part 1 of the finale, but first, Ant-Man and the Wasp. Pretty decent sequel, but honestly, I'm just waiting for Endgame. Captain Marvel. Yep. Alright, I'm just gonna make it simple. Whether this was toxic feminism or girl power, whatever floats your boat, I don't care. This was objectively a bad movie. The script was lackluster. The fights were kind of boring. Know that Carol Danvers was just gonna win with ease every time because, as we were reminded in the marketing material over and over again, she's just so strong and invincible. She obviously wasn't gonna lose any of the fights. And finally, the acting was just really bad. And no, I'm not just gonna pin it all on Brie Larson like the anti-feminists like to do. Yeah, she sucked, but so did everyone else. So, I'm just gonna move on. Avengers Endgame. Now here we come to the penultimate conclusion to the Infinity Stone saga. And what a conclusion. Like I said, with Infinity War, it was just so satisfying to see all that work come together in the end like that, although I do believe that they could have done it a little better. I'm not the biggest fan of time travel, since I simply just can't get around all of the logical inconsistencies, but whatever, I was satisfied with this conclusion, so yeah, I'll put it up in A tier, even though I don't really like time travel. Now after Endgame, my interest in Marvel has really died off, since before I could all see it building towards something big, like Endgame, with the Infinity Stone saga. But after Endgame, it just feels like they're making movies to rake in more money. And good for them in doing so, I would do the same thing. But since I can't see what they're building towards anymore, it's hard to maintain the same level of excitement as before. So from here on out, I will admit that there are some movies that I haven't seen. Also, I don't watch any of the TV shows. But yeah, I'm sure I'll get caught up again once I have more time.
Like that's ever gonna happen.
So, firstly, we had Spider-Man Far From Home, part 2 of the Spider-Man Home trilogy. And yeah, there's actually some really good commentary here about digital manipulation and misinformation. Again, no political angle, as both sides are really capable of misinformation and stuff like that. But this movie itself is pretty average, I would say. Although I wonder if the filmmakers realized what they were doing with the storyline and, you know, again, the digital manipulation of Mysterio and all of that. I don't know, it's something to think about. Black Widow. So this movie really should have come out like 3 years earlier. This feels like homework that's been turned in a week late for half credit, even though fans were begging for a Black Widow standalone movie for quite a while. Unfortunately, by the time Marvel looked up from the money stack that they were counting and realized that they could have made even more money by making this, it was just too little too late, I think. The time had passed. This was really just kind of an opportunity to make more money and also make up for not giving Black Widow the first female-led superhero slot in the Marvel Pantheon, because honestly, she deserved that much more than Captain Marvel did, but it is what it is. So Shang-Chi, this was the first Marvel movie that I haven't seen in 7 years, and I still haven't seen it. I guess at this point, I'm just kind of Marvel fatigued, so I don't know, maybe I'll get around to it at some point. The Eternals, also haven't seen this one, and to be honest, I had to double check because I thought that this was supposed to be a TV show, but I guess not. Spider-Man No Way Home. So we had the Marvel Universe, and now we have the Marvel Multiverse. Depending on where they go from here. It could either make me interested in Marvel again, or just overwhelm me with how much content I have to keep straight with all the alternate universes and past franchises tying in. This remains to be seen, but as for the movie, seeing all the Spider-Man in one place certainly gives me the spider tinglies. Well, that was actually a weird thing to say. Anyway, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Okay, well, if the multiverse is gonna be this mediocre, yeah, then maybe I'm not interested. I thought this movie was way too exposition heavy. They did have a lot of things to explain with the Darkhold and all, but some of it was just unnecessary, like when the shield goes down and somebody yells, "The shield is down!" Yeah, like, I get it, you didn't have to explain that part. And finally, Thor, Love, and Thunder. I was going to see this in theaters, but then somebody decided to get COVID. So, yeah. Pretty anticlimactic way to end this tier list, and of course it won't be long before this becomes outdated when the next movies keep coming out from here to eternity. But I hope you enjoyed watching this video, so don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you think I deserve it. This video was a little bit delayed as I've had some computer troubles, but I'm back. Everything should be good now, so content should be coming out on a regular basis finally. Again, thank you for watching, and until next time, good night.